This is IVP.
Ever wonder how God is specifically inviting you into a deeper walk with Him? Join a diverse group of students and mission-minded hearts in Indianapolis this December, the 28th through the 31st, for the Urbana Student Missions Conference. Since 1946, Urbana has been a space for whole life, whole world discipleship. A place to discover how God is calling you to use your gifts and passions in His global mission. You'll encounter stories of people who have answered their call to the Great Commission and have served it around the world. You'll engage in dynamic, joyful, multicultural worship unlike any other worship experience you've had. And you'll enter a sacred space to interact with missions organizations and experts to discern where your gifts and experiences fit in God's global work. It's time to rise up. Learn about conference discounts by signing up for the Urbana Insider Community at urbana.org and register now. That's urbana.org. Join us at Urbana 22 to discover, discern, and decide how to pair your passions with God's purpose.
Greetings, folks. Welcome to the second episode of our podcast miniseries called I'm Dreaming of a Not White Christmas. This is a podcast miniseries that I, Jemar Tisby, get to co-host with the incredible, unrepeatable, expert leader in her field, Dr. Nancy Wang Yuen. What's up?
Merry Christmas, y'all.
You're all festive. If folks are watching the video, she has a Christmas hat. I will confess, I don't have a lot of Christmas swag. I don't have a lot of Christmas merch, but you're inspiring me. Maybe I need to, in the next episode, have something
Just need
going.
to buy one and you have it forever and ever because you only wear it maybe a few days. I guess if you're a Hallmark for 3 months or whatever. But
Well, you can wear it while you're sitting at home watching some of these Christmas movies. And Nancy, I gotta say that sometimes when I'm watching these movies, I don't know if I'm watching a Christmas movie or like some Valentine's Day romantic comedy. Like some of these films, you could just take away the Christmas tree and some of the snow, and it would be perfectly appropriate to watch this in February 14th on Valentine's Day or something. The Christmas Rom-Com is like one of the most popular, if not the most popular genre of Christmas film now. What's that all about?
it wasn't always so. I feel like the Christmas movies I grew up with were more about Santa Claus and maybe family, even like something like, do you remember Elf? That
Yes.
I actually really enjoy Elf, and that story about Will Ferrell, like, you know, going from adopted elf human to finding his father. That really, I mean, there was a little bit of romance in there, but that was not the central story. It was
Not at
about
all.
actually like father, son, daddy issues kind of thing. And it was a very, that was a different kind of love that was portrayed, right? And we think about Christmas and love, if we think about Jesus, God and God coming in human form, if that's the root of love. But now we've evolved to very saccharine, very, very, like you said, rom-com, really just, but it's its own genre now, the Christmas rom-com, because there are particular tropes to be expected that I think that, there are some tropes like fake boyfriend, fake girlfriend, meet cutes, all those things that are, I think, part and parcel of rom-coms in general. But there are specifically, like for example, the royalty, like, going to a country where it's perpetually Christmas, where it's always snowing, and there's like Christmas fairs, and then you win yourself a prince. Right? I think that's a very, very popular Christmas rom-com trope that I think in alignment with the theme of what we're talking about. Usually that prince, like 99% of the time, is European of some sort, right? You're
Of
white
course. It's always a
European.
European kingdom of some sort. And so
Right.
that's what we're going to get
Castles.
into. Castles
Right.
in some part of Europe. They're not going to parts of Asia or Africa or South America.
No,
And
because those aren't associated with Christmas in the popular imagination. Right, the
exactly. And that,
castle. I don't know why castles are associated with Christmas, but somehow castles and Christmas. This is the part of the rom-com because it's the
interesting.
fantasy of everyone. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people think, oh, wouldn't it be fun to marry a prince? But as we know with Meghan Markle, that's
Oh.
sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not all that's cracked up to be, right? Which I can't wait for that Christmas movie.
Oh
you
my.
know?
So that's exactly what we're going to get into, are what is distinctive about Christmas rom-coms. And so what we're talking about is that romantic comedies, they're full of tropes, they're full of these predictable storylines, and in spite of or even perhaps because of this, they're some of the most popular films in our culture, especially the rom-coms that center around the Christmas season. And then there's companies like Hallmark that have created entire media ecosystems of Christmas films. But and this is what we're going to get into, in the attempt to make a feel-good experience for viewers, they're also reinforcing a narrow cultural and gendered idea of family, love, and Christmas. And so we're going to talk about and draw out some of these implicit and explicit messages of these films, and then help broaden our concept of what romance in a Christmas movie can look like, or even if that should be kind of the focus of some of these things. So Nancy, you were already talking about some of the tropes that we find, the princess, the castle, winning herself a prince. I love that phrase. What are some other things that characterize a Christmas rom-com?
So, a very common theme that has arisen from these Christmas rom-com is the setting is either the Western European castle, which coats white, or a small Midwestern mountain
There
town
it
that is
is.
also perpetually snowy
Yes.
and maybe has a lodge and lots of trees, Christmas trees. And the small Midwestern mountain town is in the popular mind white as well, right? Because the residents are, typically, even if they're multicultural, the main lead will be white. I'm thinking of the Lindsay Lohan movie that just came out, that's
Mhm.
dropped on Netflix, Falling for Christmas, where Lindsay Lohan is an heiress. She has amnesia, which is a common, I think, romantic comedy trope. But she's in this small mountain town, or actually, I don't even know. I mean, she's part of a kind of conglomerate, but somehow she meets a small mountain town
Yes.
in
It ends
owner.
up there somehow.
Yeah, who is blonde, who's an actor from Glee, and yet everybody around them are people of color. So even though they're trying to do diversity, the mountain town, I think, hero is going to be coated white and usually blonde, right? And so still doesn't fall too far from, I think, the mountain town, which is, if you watch so many of the rom-coms that have come out, the Christmas rom-coms, they've all been white, small mountain town. And then the main character usually has a big city corporate job, or is an heiress, or is someone's
There it
wealthy,
is.
but still...
Fish out of water kind of thing.
Yeah, but wealthy, right? Usually wealthy or high powered. So definitely upper middle class, mostly white, sometimes occasionally people of color, but again, middle to upper middle class, right? And then there's always some sort of festival, Christmas festival or Christmas, like these festivals are
The
so
big
like,
town, whatever. Yes.
yeah, like the entire town is a festival forever and ever. And then there's a white Santa. That is a very common, a white Santa who is somehow has Christmas magic, right? That's
There
where
it
the
is.
kind of
Yeah.
suspension of belief is the magic, because some things, it's like the Deus ex machina, right? Where things are not going right. And then somehow Santa redirects the misguided, couple into
Trying
love.
to capture the quote unquote magic of Christmas. And that's often taking an embodied form of Santa
Yes.
Claus, who is the container of this magic, or directs it. And then what you're saying is that Santa Claus figure is often white again.
It's
you know.
always, actually, I don't even know if I've seen a magical Santa in the Christmas rom-com. I've never seen him not old and white. Yeah, that is
interesting.
that's one because sometimes he's not dressed up as Santa, but you
Right.
all know it's Santa because he's an old white dude and he does magic. Everyone knows that's the Santa. It's like you don't even need the clothes anymore. It's actually the race and the age and the gender, right? It's the old
And
white
the white
man.
beard, yeah.
Yes.
Oh my
yes.
goodness.
Yeah,
That's how conditioned we are. They
we
don't
are
even
so
need to wear the
conditioned.
suit.
No, because sometimes they're just like drivers, or they're happen to be at the Christmas fair selling something. I think in the Princess Switch movies, he's like in Chicago, and then he somehow shows up in Slovenia, whatever that country is that they end up in. He's like the same actor, and you know that's coded. That's Santa.
My goodness. Whew. See, y'all, already rethinking some of these favorite movies. We're not trying to ruin it for anyone. We're just trying to say these are some of the implicit messages and the stories they tell about Christmas, which is, a Christian holiday centered on the incarnation and the birth of Jesus Christ, and how far afield we've gone, not only from not necessarily focusing on Jesus at all, but from that to very incessantly promoting these particular messages about what an ideal Christmas looks like, what an ideal romance at Christmas looks like, who's included, who's involved. And so that's really interesting how embedded that image of a white Santa Claus is, that we don't even need to see him in a suit anymore.
Nope. And I think that, the kind of romance is usually, almost always, even if it's interracial, it is mostly white people and heterosexual and middle to upper middle class. And it's just from the beginning, there's tension, and the resolution is coming together in a kiss under the mistletoe.
Yeah, there it is.
The families are auxiliary. It's like the romance is usually the central theme. And I think it's what people expect. It is what's selling. I mean, if we think about, I looked up the statistics on Hallmark, and it's like during a single 2-month period, 85 million people tuned in to watch a Hallmark Christmas movie.
85 million. Okay.
And during November and December, Hallmark becomes the most watched cable network. It's mostly among women aged 18 to 54, but that's a huge range. 18 to 54, right? It's like teenage women to their maybe
seniors in high school up to empty nesters almost.
That's right. Just, tuning in and buying into this fantasy. So there is gendered aspect of it, right? Because usually women are the leads. So that's understandable. But, I know, Jemar, you noticed that there was like the men kind of come in and maybe they change the women somehow, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of these tropes, I think, of rom-coms in general, but certainly of a Christmas romance. And they might be a romance or a romantic comedy. Usually it's both. There's this idea of a woman who's in some sort of distress, whether it's amnesia or she's in a town she's not familiar with and she's stuck, or she is too career obsessed and has forgotten, the bigger things and more important things in life. And it's only through the love of a man that she sort of gets rescued, if you will, from whatever conundrum that she's in. That's just one of the tropes that I've noticed that, sets it up like a woman needs a man to be whole or complete or healthy, kind of a thing. And somehow the man in these Christmas rom-coms always has the answer. And he's usually this kind of like all shucks kind of guy who, just very plain, salt of the earth kind of a guy who's, almost universally white. But it's through that connection with this male character that the woman solves her problem. And that was just interesting to me for the messages that it sends there.
Yeah, and if she's a corporate woman who is high-powered, it's like it takes the small town, maybe sometimes even working class man to remind her that the family and the hearth is where happiness is, which is a very, very traditional conservative value, right? Of women don't kind of work yourself out of a man, work yourself out of a, out of a family. You're not meant to kind of rise up in the corporate ladder. That's not where happiness is, right? So that is definitely one type of Christmas movie that I have also observed, and that definitely reinforces kind of a more conservative family ideal, which is much more, I think, in alignment with maybe conservative quote unquote Christian cultural norms,
Sure.
rather than anything that has to do with faith, right?
Right. And understand we're not. So this is a really sensitive cultural touch point that I think people misunderstand so often, is to say, people will hear that and say, well, how is family conservative? What's political about that, or how is it conservative? What we're talking about is the emphasis on the nuclear family, the emphasis on the man and woman, husband and wife, their 2.5 kids, right? For most of our history, including European and white history, family was much more capacious. It was absolutely extended family, blood relatives from grandparents to cousins and aunts and uncles, but also the sense of one's local community, and it takes a village kind of a thing. So part of what is involved in the culture of, sort of valorizing and elevating the nuclear family, it's, even though it's a family, it's almost individualistic in the sense that it's detached from a broader community. And for people of color, that sense of family has retained much more of the sense of being a much bigger community. So that's what we're talking about. We're not saying family in and of itself is political or conservative or progressive or anything. We're saying the emphasis on this small unit, which really, even in U.S. history, wasn't the emphasis until about the 1950s, the post-World War II era. What we're saying is that emphasis is what many conservatives are thinking of, and what many people of color and other folks would have a different idea when it comes to family in a lot of cases. So I just wanted to clarify that, because this is one of those things that's so annoying to me, that people think like, when you say something about the family, you're anti-family. No, we're pro-family in its broader definitions and implications.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was raised by my grandparents, so for sure, family is much broader than the nuclear. I mean, I think of my grandmother as my mother, in a lot of ways, and so. But I also think that I'm also talking about the kind of family can only work if the woman is not working at home.
Exactly.
When, even when I was teaching, I was like, it's really hard to sustain a middle-class living, especially in Southern California, on a single salary. It's just not really possible, right? Or actually, it's completely impossible to maintain a middle-class lifestyle if you only have a single person working, unless they're, super rich. But it's, for most early college graduates, they have to, both work if that's the kind of lifestyle they want. And it's just not, I think there's like a disconnect between reality and the world that we live in now, and then these kind of ideas that only, the man should work and the woman should stay at home. Oh, I just want to say that I don't know if all the rom-coms, like, especially the ones that I like, the Christmas rom-coms, it's not like the women have to stay at home. But there is this kind of like, stop caring about work. Let's think about home, right? That was an Elf too, actually, if I think about it, right? Because that was actually interesting that the father was too busy with work not focusing. Yeah, and a lot of those earlier movies, I think, were about that. And it's interesting that it's kind of switched a little bit. I'm not sure if that is a kind of reprimand of women working, or just, when we have women that are the leads now, it's like they're reproducing the same trope, right? But because women are leads, they're falling into that kind of standard of what does the Christmas rom-com look like?
Well, as we're talking about tropes and whatnot, and you mentioned the Hallmark Channel before, it's become virtually synonymous, not only with Christmas movies, but with Christmas rom-com. Obviously, they do the cards, right? But a lot of people, I think, even the first thing that would come to mind when you hear Hallmark is the Christmas movie. And it's just so interesting to me, the racial demographics of the movies, of the Christmas movies at Hallmark. And along with that, which I don't think is unrelated, the fact that conservatives and Christian conservatives really love Hallmark Christmas movies. I have more to say on that, but can you speak at all to things like the Hallmark Channel? There's more, there's Lifetime, there's another channel that we'll talk about in a moment, but this conservative love of these kinds of Christmas movies that we're talking about.
I mean, they are very PG at most, right? There's no cursing, there's no sex. I mean, I don't even think people kiss until maybe, under the mistletoe and maybe at the end.
It's the last scene, the culmination.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Well, that's the it's almost like a Disney princess movie, right? Where at the end you finally get together and it's the love, the quote unquote consummation of the love is just a kiss. It's just a very, very pure kiss.
It's very safe. Yeah.
Yeah. Very safe. And it's very predictable. Which I think that because like the tropes that I had mentioned, and I think because of the predictability, it feels safer, right? There's not going to be something that's going to pop up that's going to be offensive. And even if people of color appear, they're still following the same tropes. It's still predictable. It's not like someone's going to call out racism in a Christmas movie. Right. Even if they do, it's going to be very subtle, right? Very subtle. It's still because it's these are rom-coms. They are happy. The two main characters are going to end up at the end and everything gets resolved. Right. So I think that, that is, if we think
tied up in a nice Christmas bow.
Yeah. If we think of conservatism as traditional, we don't like change. This genre, even though we just said it's pretty modern, I think the first Hallmark holiday movie came out in 2000. So it's pretty modern. Right. And there wasn't that many, it's just that one. Yeah. And then now we have it's gone up to I think it's 39 this year. I just want to, this is the really interesting part about Hallmark. So 39 holiday films as part of their Countdown to Christmas franchise. This is up 50% plus from 5 years ago. And it's premiering a week earlier in October. Countdown to Christmas starts in October. And since 2012, Hallmark has held a Christmas in July event by airing their previous movies. So they don't even have to spend any more money. They just run reruns, right? And then in February of 2019, in honor of their upcoming 10th anniversary of the Countdown to Christmas, they aired selections of movies on Friday nights throughout the whole year.
Throughout the year.
Christmas
they are going to
Fridays.
Ring all of the money, all of the viewership they can out of these Christmas movies all year long.
It is a huge business boon for Hallmark, right? This is what we know of Hallmark now is these Christmas movies, and everybody wants to jump on the ship. So Lifetime, like we said, Lifetime, there's this year, there's 26 holiday movies.
Jeez.
So there's hundreds of new movies being released. Netflix, there's 6 of them, including the Lindsay Lohan we mentioned. There's 10 holiday movies coming from BET Plus. Okay.
Really?
So, yes.
Okay, Black folks getting in it.
Yep, because Black folks love Christmas too, everybody, right?
Absolutely.
There's 4 from Discovery Plus. I just saw an ad that HGTV people are people that weren't even actors are doing stuff. They're all jumping in, right? Because I think that HGTV, this is again the home, right? This idea of a home as a theme of Christmas and maybe the things that people are drawn to. Yeah, and HBO Max, CBS, Fox Nation. I don't know about what channel that is, but there's one coming from them as well. So everybody's in. Everybody's throwing in their Santa hats into the ring.
Good one. I see what you did there. It's the kids' bookification of Christmas movies.
Have you heard about the new monthly book club from InterVarsity Press? IVP Book Drop is the perfect club for readers who want to grow spiritually, hear from diverse voices, and start powerful conversations on today's most important cultural topics. Plus, it's only $9.99 each month. When you join IVP Book Drop, you'll receive our best-selling title, Reading While Black by Esau McCaulley, as your very first book. And after that, you'll continue to receive one curated book a month for just $9.99. As a listener of the Disruptors podcast, you already know many of the diverse authors featured like Esau McCaulley, and you'll meet even more authors like them each month. IVP Book Drop is the easiest and most affordable way to receive the latest IVP books from your favorite authors. To learn more and join today for only $9.99, visit ivpress.com/disrupt22. That's ivpress.com/disrupt22. Save big on books worth talking about by signing up for IVP Book Drop today.
As an author, I'm looking at these things and like everybody comes up with a kid's book, even if that's not their thing, right? Because it's always so popular. It's a guaranteed seller. If you can get good illustrations and a simple feel-good story, well, you're going to sell some books, right? And everybody seems to be jumping in on, making a children's book, let's say. Now everybody's jumping in on this Christmas because it's a guarantee. And we were talking about like this sort of affinity between these films and Christian conservatives. I looked into it a little bit. So to me, it all falls under this idea of wholesomeness. What is considered wholesome? And as you pointed out, these films are safe, right? Like you can have them on, even in my family, my in-laws, both of whom are Black. My father-in-law loves Hallmark movies, and it'll be on in the background, just like running all day long, because Hallmark 39 films, they're going to run these back to back to back to back to back for weeks at a time. And so it's like background noise. And part of the reason why he and others feel comfortable to do that is because they know nothing's going to pop up that's going to be controversial. If there's people of color in the film, they're not going to make a big deal about it. They're just going to show up and, look good in the brochure kind of a thing. They're not going to touch on highly sensitive topics. And it caused me to go back not that long ago. Hallmark got in some hot water for not holding up this supposed wholesome image. Understand, wholesome in many of these films is coded as white, middle-class, heterosexual Christian. That is the idea of wholesome. And so then when you deviate from that, that's when you get into trouble. So in 2019, Hallmark showed some ads for, it was this like online wedding planning thing. And it showed a wedding and it showed two women. And they were taking vows to get married. There was this massive backlash. It was so bad that the CEO of Hallmark shortly thereafter stepped down. Now, he didn't say that's why he did, but, the timing was very suggestive. And then what it did was it disrupted this idea of wholesomeness. So what I also found was interesting, Candace Cameron Bure, she was, sitcom star, now has become, I read in one article, the Queen of Christmas, because she's in so many of these Christmas movies. But I'm like, isn't the Queen of Christmas Mariah Carey? But see, that's another cultural thing.
That's who I think of. I do not think of Candace.
Exactly, no. But some would. And she was like the cornerstone actress for all these Christmas movies. She recently left Hallmark to go to a network called Great American Country Media, GAC Media. Supposedly, so she would have more creative control. She could produce and, direct or whatever she wanted to do. But it is also a place where she felt she could be more overt in the Christian themes that she is passionate about. She's a person of faith. She identifies as a Christian. What's also interesting is that GAC is run by the former CEO of Hallmark. So the guy who left in the midst of that backlash went over, and he's now running GAC. His name is Bill Abbott. Now,
and he started the countdown to Christmas. He was the originator.
He's the guy who started. Yeah. Okay. So he sort of presided over this like mushrooming of Christmas films at Hallmark. Now he's doing the same thing at GAC. And in terms of the conservative connections, the web gets even thicker. The owner of GAC is a guy named Thomas Hicks. Now, Thomas Hicks and his family are close friends and supporters of Donald Trump. They tried to buy the OANN network, which is like wall-to-wall MAGA kind of pro-MAGA coverage, the people who are backing this now rival network to Hallmark are very politically, they're really conservative political activists. And of course, that's going to come out in their programming. And so as we look at these films, it's not even just what's on screen, it's what's happening in the business of it all, in the business of all these networks. And you wonder why, they tend to A, attract a certain audience, and B, feature certain actors and actresses. Well, some of it's tied to those leanings.
Yeah, and who gets to be the great American family, right? In
That's right.
all
That's
of
right.
these Christmas
Exactly.
movies. Who is that family? What do they look like? What do they eat? What do they consider love, right? What is the definition of wholesome, right? I think we need to deconstruct that when we're thinking about, I laugh at these tropes, but these tropes all, like the tropes that I mentioned, code white, code upper or middle class, and code very straight and very, I think, nuclear. If we want to go back to the nuclear family, like if there are extended family, they are supporting cast. The main plot is always around the man and the woman falling in love, right? Sometimes there's a kid, sometimes there's, brother or sister, but they are all supporting. And I think that, it defines what the American family is supposed to look like.
Yeah. And things get really interesting when you ask, well, why can't wholesome be Muslim? Why can't wholesome be brown skinned? Why can't wholesome be poor or working class? Why is wholesome in our culture, and certainly in these Christmas movies, always this very narrow definition of it?
I have Muslim friends who love Christmas, the culture of it, because it's so divorced from the actual religion. I think they just celebrate it as a cultural thing, right? That's what's so interesting. In their mind, they can read that it's not religious anymore. Like these Christmas movies are not religious. The kind of holiday of it is really not religious because we've created this Christmas industrial complex. So it's so funny that my Muslim friends will celebrate it because it's just an American cultural thing. And they don't find it necessarily going against their religious beliefs if they're practicing. So they already figured it out. I don't know what American Christians think of all of this, right? Do we think of this? I think of it as very American, right? Because that was what I learned coming here, that this is Christmas and the way that we celebrate it. When I'm watching the Christmas rom-coms, there's a feeling of good cheer and kind of the rom-com will they, won't they? It's always will they. but
when will they? How long will it take? Yes.
Well, we know the span of an hour and a half, wherever it is,
there
right?
It is.
And so, but I never think I'm going to see Jesus in this movie or I'm going to just come out of it really growing in my faith. Like none of that is happening when I'm watching these movies. Instead, I'm actually always watching, okay, how are they going to represent what a family is? And is there going to be people of color and what roles are they going to play? I am interested in that.
And I just, as an aside, find it so interesting that Christmas magic is okay, but wizards and witches, that magic is not okay with some of these
Santa magic is okay, right?
Santa magic is safe, but
why is Santa magic okay? It's totally wizardry. It's totally witchcraft. Santa is totally performing witchcraft in these things, right?
just interesting.
Totally.
Let's talk about some examples. Let's use some of this framework that we're talking about with movies we all know and love. Is there a particular Christmas rom-com that you think is ripe for analysis in I'm Dreaming of a Not White Christmas series?
Oh my goodness. When I was looking up to remind myself, what are Christmas romantic movies? Actually, It's a Wonderful Life popped up. I don't think of it as a comedy. Definitely not a comedy.
No,
it's one of those movies that actually, I think resonates with my feelings, my mixed feelings about Christmas, my personal mixed feelings, and I appreciate that. That it actually gets into kind of the darkness that people often go through. But at the end of the day, there is a romantic element between actually a husband and wife, right? And so I think that, romance and Christmas have been around for a long time. But I think the movies used to be a little deeper, right? Because I think of that movie as much more, because it's kind of a reevaluation of one's life, right? Almost like an end of the year,
sure.
and also like the kind of am I living up to what I thought my life should be? And to me, that feels more like what Christmas should be, right?
Yeah, and this is the James Stewart film,
Yes.
1940s, I think. Guy is like in a crisis, his business is failing and everything. An angel comes down to basically, guide him in that course of that reflection. And so this actually brings in some of the class elements and things that we've talked about before. But what you're talking about is like there's much bigger themes here. Like he's reevaluating his whole life. The Charles Dickens story as well, Ghosts of, Christmas past, present, and future. It's like, look at your life, evaluate. Are you living in a way that's loving and serving others?
And it's an anti-capitalist themes, actually, right? It's a Christmas story, and I think It's a Wonderful Life. Like that, it's like materialism or material success is not the measurement of happiness. It is the family. Or in a Christmas Story case with Scrooge, it's actually not necessarily even your own family, what you're doing for the community, right? Are you exploiting your workers and their families,
That's so
right?
interesting.
So much closer.
As we juxtapose those to what's happening now. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that I mean, I think the longevity of the Scrooge mythology, I think, even to this day, I think one of the Asian American movies from Christmas movies, the very, very few that I could count on one hand, was actually, I think it was Boyfriends of Christmas Past. And that was, that is actually it's based on the Scrooge myth, right? And so I think it's very interesting that the idea of looking back and seeing what is it that we're, reevaluating one's life and maybe thinking about our values, right? Committing to our values. And I think that to me is more Christ-like than, will we or won't we get together with the prince? Even though, again, I love those movies. I'm not hating on the Christmas Prince movies because those are so fun, but that isn't, why Jesus came to this earth. So.
That is so interesting, almost chilling in the example. And of course, those movies that we're talking about are still very white, but they're much bigger and deeper and more enduring themes, right?
Well, they talk about class difference, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Because in that time, maybe Charles Dickens is the author that points out the kind of class inequality and disparity, right? He's definitely for the working class. And so I feel like, that and Jane Austen, when she was writing about, gender, maybe inequality, like I when I was an English major, I was drawn to these writings because it was the closest I could find as an English major, because if you're an English major in the United States, you basically read all white authors for the most part, in terms of the canon, right?
Right.
And so I found myself drawn to authors who, at least talked about inequality in the context that they were, that having a Christmas Story by Charles Dickens, being the classic is, I don't know, it's like, I'm not like, let's go back to the classics kind of person, especially like you said, it's still, kind of exclusive. But I think that there's more meaning there that versus the kind of 30, 50, 100 plus movies that are coming out per year that again, totally fine entertainment. But if we consider that the embodiment of Christmas, we are kind of losing sight, especially when it's defended so kind of vehemently as like, don't destroy it has to be this way. Don't destroy this vision of the Christmas family or of Christmas love. It feels really off the actual meaning of Christmas. And I've always thought this whole war on Christmas, like what Christmas are we talking about here? What are we? What's the war and what is Christmas that you're talking about? Because
the war is you can't say Merry Christmas. You got to say Happy Holidays. That is so, I'm making light of it. But yeah, it is the sense that, again, what is wholesome? How quote unquote should Christmas be? That's what we're talking about. And so folks who are crying a war on Christmas are really talking about, I have this image, this picture of Christmas that is very culturally conditioned, a lot through the media that we consume around Christmas. And now that's changing, and I don't like it. I'm calling it a war. That's really helpful to understand.
Yeah, the thing that you feel like is changing, though, isn't even, I think, the actual thing that we should be protecting. Right? And
it's the war on it's really the Christmas industrial complex that we're talking about.
Yes, the war on that. And when we say Merry Christmas, not no one, but I don't know if anyone's like, and do you know Jesus? It really is this kind of Merry Christmas, meaning merry trees and tinsel and ornaments and Rudolph and Santa magic wizard and all of that, which again, I'm fine with just acknowledging what that is, right? Because I don't actually want that to go away. We just name it. This is the Christmas industrial complex, and it's definitely pleasurable. All the movies, all the gift wraps, all this stuff, it's fun, right? It's fun. It's part of the capitalistic society, and it's okay to celebrate and relax at the end of the year,
Yeah, we can still like it.
Yeah, have festivities, all that. Just don't call it this is the Christmas that, we're protecting as Christians of faith, right? Because that's an idol if we start to reduce that into who the birth of Jesus and what that means to us as people of faith.
I wanted to talk about one more example that I think you've got something to say about. It's a modern classic. It definitely falls in the rom-com category.
Oh my gosh.
Love Actually. Love Actually.
Yes, which has, the Mariah Carey song. The Mariah Carey song, actually, All I Want for Christmas Is You. This idea, I actually think that is the embodiment of the Christmas rom-com right there. All I want for Christmas is you. And it ain't Jesus. Right? It's like some love just out of reach, right? A kind of love that you're trying to get, a romantic love of some sort. And although I have heard of this song being sung in churches, and I think they're trying to reclaim it. Yes, it was a Hollywood church, I have to say, and they sounded like pop singers. And I was sitting there thinking, wow, they're singing this song as a praise song. But anyway,
Christians will use any song that's catchy in worship. They'll find a way.
Right, because it's sometimes I go there and it's like a concert, right, to attract more people to come into its doors. Anyway, I'm not slamming that. It's whatever. This is Hollywood. This is Hollywood. But I think that this movie, I think I just saw some posts where it's I think it was Entertainment Weekly. It's our favorite movie of all time, but it's been shown to be super problematic on multiple fronts, right?
The
it's
Hugh Grant story. Movies.
Yes.
There's eight different couples all trying to deal with their love lives. And it's one of those things where, all the stories cross at some point. And again, it's a modern classic. It's a who's who. Liam Neeson, Keira Knightley, Hugh Grant, Colin Firth, all those folks. If you haven't seen it, it's been 20 years, y'all. But yeah, that's the movie that we're talking about. And you saying, but now it's problematic in some ways.
Yeah, I don't think it's aged very well because at least two of the romances are between boss and subservient, someone who's under their power. And so the power dynamics there are exploitative. And yet when I saw it, I was like, oh, it's so romantic, so cute, but no, and then there's, I think, is there only one person of color? Chiwetel Ejiofor, right? I think he marries Keira Knightley. And then the romance is between her and his best friend who's white.
The white guy. Exactly is what I was thinking of.
Super problematic there. He's obsessed with her. And this is and then you don't even see Chiwetel Ejiofor, who is Oscar nominated. Did he win? I don't think he won, but Oscar nominated, amazing actor who just gets to be the husband who is at the wedding and then kind of disappears. It's all white romances, and you just feel this is 8 stories, right? And this is lauded as one of the, best Christmas rom-coms of all time. And it's got huge stars, right? And at the same time, yes, I can watch it and still like remember my young self enjoying it. But now I see it with a much more critical eye. Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do in this whole series. It's just like be mature about the Christmas culture that we're consuming. And as we said in the first episode, as we've said throughout this one, we appreciate this thing. We appreciate these movies. They're brain candy. It's fun. It's relaxing. You can enjoy it, but also just be aware. Don't simply be a passive consumer of this Christmas culture, but understand what messages that are being communicated and that we are, in some ways subtly adopting and maybe perpetuating some harmful things. This was all about the Christmas rom-com. We are in the series I'm Dreaming of a Not White Christmas, looking at really this that has come around the culture of Christmas, particularly in the United States. The next episode, we'll actually talk about Christmas in color. So there has been movement, there has been shifts to try to get more racial and ethnic diversity present in films and to deal with it seriously. Some films do better than others, and we'll talk through all of that. So thank you for joining us on this episode of I'm Dreaming of a Not White Christmas, and we will see you on the next one.